I still remember what they did. I remember waving my elder brothers off as they joined their ships. They looked so resplendent in their guard's uniform. But I was too young to go with them. I didn't realize it would be the last time I ever saw them. After they left, I went trekking up Mount Kitakwa, as we had done together so many times as boys. After 3 days, I returned home. In just 3 days, my world ended. I could feel something was wrong. As I entered the settlement, people were hiding behind their shutters, houses covered in black scorch marks. And then I saw them, Klingons, walking about with the confidence of conquerors. I felt their eyes on me, looking for any excuse. When I got there, I looked up to see my home a smouldering ruin. I stood there, paralyzed. But eventually I saw my parents, suspended up from the balcony, strung up for all to see. On what had been my front porch, a group of Klingons stood, looking upon their butchery, and they laughed. They were laughing. But now we have them, like rats in a trap. At last, we've cornered those Klingon monsters. They have nowhere left to hide. We can pick them off at our leisure. Finally, I shall avenge the atrocities of 2 years past. Blood for blood.
Despite their losses during the invasion of Cardassia, the Arcanus conflict, and the Dominion's Storm of Salvation, by August of 2374, the Klingon Starfleet had once again fully mobilized, with a total of 600 ships deployed along the front line. While the Klingons had been slow to remobilize at the start of the war, they had still been instrumental in the first phases of the war, with General Kachang leading a dogged defense of Arcadia, and Marshal Kurak leading a critical breakthrough in support of Operation Return. While these contributions to the war effort were significant, for Chancellor Gowron, it was not enough. Gowron was of the view that as the senior combatant, it was they, not the Federation, who should be leading the war effort. This perspective was not without some valid reasoning. Having been at war for almost 4 years, the Klingons substantially benefited from battle experience over their Starfleet counterparts, and most critically, had experience in offensive operations. Yet Gowron's desire for military glory blinded him to the shortcomings of his own fleet. While he had many experienced officers, attrition meant that he had far more raw recruits. Additionally, his overall fleet was still much smaller than that of his allies, and so realistically could not act without support from their Starfleet counterparts. At a meeting of Klingon High Command on the 12th of June, Chancellor Gowron expressed his desire for an offensive before the year's end. While some officers like General Martok and Kachang expressed doubts, the majority of courtiers backed Gowron's plan, as they agreed with Gowron that the Federation would never undertake offensive action on its own initiative. It was up to the Klingon Empire to lead the charge against the Dominion. Gowron appointed Marshal Kurak to lead his offensive. A loyal supporter of Gowron during the Klingon Civil War, Kurak had himself been trained by the legendary tactician, General Chang. Kurak's plan, codenamed Operation Bloodpie, was uncharacteristically methodical for a Klingon offensive. The first stages would involve a series of massed attacks against the systems of Argelius and Artalia. Then, as the Dominion weakened its flanks to protect its core territory, Kurak would attack from the south of the Vaultera Nebula, and Martok could potentially attack north of the Badlands. By doing so, he could break Dominion lines and bring about maneuver warfare. On September 6th, the Chancellor's Raiders and the 4th Strike Fleet began the offensive, attacking the 18th Order. General Mayvac of the Chancellor's Raiders opted to use the agility of his fleet to his advantage, spreading out along the edge of the system and destroying the tachyon detection grids. The Cardassians were swift to react, with divisions of the 18th Order quickly massing to close the gap. As Mavac's brigades broke off, the legate allowed his light division to give chase. Yet as he did so, General Kajal of the 4th Strike Fleet attacked from the right. With their flank unguarded, the Cardassian ranks were quickly broken up as the Klingons charged through. Nevertheless, the Cardassians quickly reformed their lines to face Kajal's ships, but as they did so, the raiders returned, having outmaneuvered the Cardassian light division, once again outflanking the Cardassian fleet, enfilading their lines and shooting through them, penetrating the system's perimeter. And as the strike fleet attacked again, with its strongest ships forming a spearhead and the lighter ships on the flanks, they crashed through the Cardassian line, and the legate ordered a full retreat. While the raiders gave some chase, General Mavac was conscious of the Jem'hadar patrols, and so held his ships back from overextending. With the first attack a success, the Kalas Chosen and Sons of Khan went for Artalia on the 16th, aware that their colleagues' success may have shaken Cardassian morale. General Baral of the Kalas Chosen elected to win the battle with a single, decisive move. Prior to launching a full-scale attack, both fleets detached Burrell wings to poke holes in the system's tachyon grid. The gaps were random, and so the Cardassians were forced to spread their forces to meet any potential attack, allowing Baral and his flag brigade to slip through the perimeter and intercept the Cardassian flagship, personally leading the attack aboard the battlecruiser Vouday. Baral began with a full spread of torpedoes. The Cardassians realized they would be outgunned at range, and so began to close to mid-range, but as they did so, the Vouday cloaked. Fearing being flanked, the Cardassians deployed into echelon, leaving the Vouday no option but to attack the rearmost ship. As a Klingon decloaked to the rear of the column, the Surratt swung around and fired a full volley at a mere bird of prey. The Vouday then decloaked and fired a full volley at the center ship, breaking its shields, and as the Vouday turned, she fired another spread of torpedoes, destroying the center ship. From there, Baral began to circle the Surratt, pouring on disruptor fire. Despite being lighter, the Surratt was unable to break away from the Vouday, and while her sister ship tried to support, the Vouday easily kept her at bay, soon destroying the Surratt. With their flagship destroyed, the Cardassians lost heart and quickly fled from the system in a chaotic retreat, providing Marshal Kurak with yet another sweeping victory. With 2 Federation worlds now liberated, Gowron's aggressive plan seemed to have been vindicated, and Kurak prepared to move to the next phase. But he would never get the chance. On the 15th of October, he received a message advising him that Dominion forces had advanced to Betazed, and he was advised to withdraw. However, Kurak dismissed this as a mere raid intended to sap momentum from his offensive. Only on the 18th of October, when he received a message from Starfleet warning that the Dominion fleet was turning northwest, and intelligence reports from General Mavac warning of a large Dominion fleet massing, did he realize that he was standing in a Dominion trap, a trap that was about to close. Kurak quickly ordered all his fleets to withdraw to Solaria, just beyond the Dominion encirclement. But as a result of the overwhelming speed and force with which the Dominion attacked, only the Chancellor's raiders, the 4th Strike Fleet, and the Kalas Chosen escaped this encirclement, which by the 28th of October had been completely closed, trapping therein the 6th Sons of Khan, the Imperial Guard, and the 7th Strike Fleet, and Chang's champions, along with the Federation 9th Fleet. They were enveloped on all sides by 8 Cardassian orders. Much like the Klingons, the Cardassians had a long memory. They remembered the brutality and humiliation of the Klingon invasion, and now the Klingons would pay for their arrogance in a bloody massacre. Even though many Cardassians were keen to see the Klingons suffer, few had the stomach to undertake such a bloody task, apart from one, Gultar Sobrag, the Beast of Brenthar. When he ran a Bajoran labor camp during the occupation, he would often execute prisoners personally, beating them to death with his bare hands. He was renowned for his exceptional brutality in pacification operations. He was always willing to get his hands dirty. The prospect of avenging himself on the Klingons filled Sabrag with glee. As for the Klingons trapped inside the Vaultera pocket, they were well aware of how perilous their situation was, and that they should attempt to break out as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, this would prove to be impossible. The Cardassians were extremely efficient at jamming or intercepting long-range communications, preventing coordination between fleets. And so, rather than try to coordinate or maneuver over a wide area, the Klingons attempted to mass their forces to simply batter their way through the Cardassian lines. But without long-range communications, they could not coordinate this effort, and the various fleets became confused and disorganized as they were unsure as to which system they should rendezvous in, and Sabrag was careful to make sure that this didn't happen, using his light divisions to intercept and interdict movements between the various fleets. The most disastrous example of these interceptions occurred on the 7th of November, as the 7th Strike Fleet at Tarsas attempted to regroup with the Imperial Guard at Iadara, not realizing that between them and their comrades were 2 light divisions from the Cardassian Guards and 14th Orders, as well as pickets from a near Jem'hadar fleet. Not only were the officers of the Guard Order the best in the Union, but their ships were second to none, with the Guards making a new addition to their ranks, the Sartan-class frigate. Designed quickly during the war, the Sartan was intended to respond to the extremely fluid battlespace which had developed. It largely made use of the same components as the Rysalak, but was larger and more powerful, at 289 meters long, while boasting comparable sublight speed and agility to the Rysalak and superior warp performance, while being able to hold its own against similar frigates and even enemy-like cruisers. With 6 Sartans joining the light divisions, the Cardassians now had a chance to test their newest weapon. General Turok had not conducted any reconnaissance, since he did not want to alert the enemy to his intentions. He also split his fleet up into 4 brigades, which would move towards their objective under cloak. Thereby, if one brigade was discovered, it would not compromise their comrades and still allow them a fighting chance. Even so, he had greatly underestimated the forces awaiting him in deep space. Brigadier Ontuk was the first to encounter these new ships, detecting at 0321 a Cardassian line along his flight path. As was standard practice in Klingon doctrine, he ordered his brigade to slow down and allow the Cardassians to pass in front of them. Yet as he did so, another line approached them from the aft, the Cardassians clearly employing a grid search pattern, and so he ordered a full stop, waiting for the Cardassians to fly past. However, the Cardassians had been following the gravitic wake of the Klingons, and so they knew that they were in the area. Previously, there would have been little the Cardassians could have done to act on their suspicions, but with the Sartan, that changed. The Sartans initiated an anti-proton scan, while the other line held position ahead of the Klingons, blocking their escape. With nowhere to run or hide, Brigadier Antok ordered his ships to attack, but his brigade, largely consisting of aged Katingas and D-10s, was intended for planetary assaults, not deep space combat, and the Cardassian frigates and destroyers easily ran circles around them, staying at close range, preventing the Klingons from using their lances. The Sartans focused their attention on the larger Klingon ships, whilst the Rysalaks dispatched the harassing birds of prey. However, the Cardassians' confidence would not go unpunished, as one of the birds of prey, realizing he would soon be destroyed either way, ordered ramming speed at one of the Sartans. The Sartan, too close to avoid the charging bird of prey, was destroyed, creating an opening through which only 16 of the 30 ships managed to escape, retreating back to Tarsas. Meanwhile, Brigadier Lomak was almost immediately picked up by a Jem'hadar patrol. Initially, he was able to fend off the Dominion attack ships, but as more and more Jem'hadar joined the pursuit, the brigade's pace began to slow, allowing the Cardassian Light Division of the 19th Order to intercept and engage them. While Lomac was far better equipped to deal with agile enemy destroyers, he suffered a heavy loss of momentum, and many of his ships had suffered engine damage. He knew that he could not make it to Iadara with them following, and so he too was forced to return to Tarsas. With 2 of his brigades retreating, General Turok knew well that he could not push on without compromising the integrity of his fleet, and so he ordered the remaining 2 brigades to fall back, the mission to regroup with the guards largely ending before it had even begun. A few days later, on November 12th, the slaughter began in earnest, as a Jem'hadar fleet, along with the Cardassian 3rd and 22nd Orders, converged on the 9th Fleet at New Helena. While Admiral Terep fought hard, after losing 31 ships, he ordered the fleet to scuttle and abandon their ships, surrendering to the Dominion. So Bragg gracefully accepted the Federation's surrender, a courtesy he would not extend to the Klingons, and now turned his attention to the 4 Klingon fleets. His first victim would be Chang's champions, under command of the savior of Arcadia himself, General Kachang. Being an adept and experienced defender, Kachang dug in on Eladrel. He drew on his experiences at Arcadia. Not having enough mines to cover the whole system's perimeter, he instead opted to deploy the mines in a random dispersion pattern throughout the system. So rather than control enemy movement, these minefields would instead inflict random attrition on the advancing enemy and wear them down. Additionally, and contrary to conventional wisdom, Kachang did not divide up his defense of the system into 4 quarters to be covered by each brigade. Instead, he broke up the brigades, integrating the wings into massed big wings, which would form 3 layers of defense, which could fall back and still maintain cohesion. This would also allow the massing of formations where necessary. With Birds of Prey forming the skirmish line, Vaultera forming a firing line, and Katinga in a support line, it would allow Kachang to operate a flexible, maneuverable defense whose rally point could be adjusted as the battle unfolded. But against such odds, no defense would be strong enough, as on the 2nd of December, the Cardassian 3rd, 7th and 22nd Orders attacked Eladrel. With a total of 294 ships, the Cardassians outnumbered Kachang 2-1 and were ready to avenge themselves on the Klingons. Some even had a personal grievance against Kachang himself for his key role in the Battle of Sector 73 Epsilon 2 years ago, where he wiped out many of Cardassia's best and brightest. They would now return the favour. At 04:48, the 3 vanguards of the Cardassian fleets entered the system. Knowing that the Klingons would be cloaked, they deployed in a hook and bait pattern, with the smaller ships spreading out ahead, offering a tempting target, whilst the destroyers hung back, waiting to pounce on any decloaking ship. Yet the Klingons held their discipline, and at 05:01, a Cardassian ship struck a mine cluster, destroying it instantly. Believing this to be the edge of a larger minefield, the Cardassians veered off, losing cohesion. Then Major Tamaka's Burrell wing decloaked and engaged the vanguard. While he and his Birds of Prey did slow the Cardassians using their cloak and dagger tactics, they were ultimately repulsed, and Tamaka bought this time with his very life. Yet despite repulsing the Birds of Prey, the Cardassians were reluctant to charge further into the system, fearing the Klingon mines. Only after regrouping did the Cardassians attack again at 08:47, with the 17th Order advancing in column, the lead ships sweeping for mines, while the artillery division held back behind a cleared perimeter on either side of the column. As the legate predicted, the Klingon Birds of Prey began attacking both sides of the column, but they soon came under fire from the artillery division. Even so, the front of the column was engaged by a Vaultera and Katinga wing, and they were taking casualties. Nevertheless, they pushed forward. However, the artillery division soon found itself under counter-battery fire from a Katinga wing on their flank. When the Cardassians turned to return fire, the flank of their column was once again set upon by Birds of Prey, the tightly packed Cardassian ships making for easy pickings. Having been outmaneuvered, the 17th Order fell back, but did so with fresh intelligence in hand, realizing that the Klingons had deployed their mines in a dispersed and likely random pattern. They cross-referenced this with known Klingon flight paths and were able to map out a small area of the minefield. While it did not give them a complete picture, it was enough to form a plan of attack. The three orders deployed in a three-rank open order. The front rank contained the lighter, more expendable ships, which one way or another would clear the mines as they advanced, and protect the successive ranks from a Klingon charge. The second rank contained most of the ships of the line, and they together would form a gigantic 36-ship tachyon grid. With this vast dragnet, the Cardassians would sweep through the system and corner the Klingons. Then, following behind, were the Cardassian assault cruisers and artillery ships, ready to obliterate any Klingons caught in the net. At 12:32, they commenced their advance into the system, slowly but surely herding the Klingons into a corner for slaughter. Kachang realized that they needed to attack sooner rather than later, and so he decided to play the Cardassians' game. If the Cardassians wanted to herd fish, then they should expect them to jump. At 14:52, he massed his brigades together near one section of the grid, before all at once decloaking and charging through the grid like fish jumping a net. They took quick shots at any targets of opportunity. Even so, they paid dearly for this tactic, taking heavy broadsides from the gallows and sniping from the facades, losing 6 ships. Unfortunately, it only delayed the inevitable. The Cardassians simply came about and began closing the net the other way. With no means of escape, Kachang could only repeat this tactic, losing more ships each time. By 2006, only 42 ships were left. He ordered the ships still in fightable condition to fall back to El-Ardrel to protect the garrison, while he and the other heavily damaged ships prepared for one final charge. Decloaking, Kachang broadcasted one final message. "Come, brothers, we are awaited in Stovokor. Let the thunder of our guns announce our arrival." He then led a headlong charge at the Cardassians, blazing with every weapon and ramming straight into the gallows, with Kachang personally ramming one of the Cardassian flagships. Despite this blaze of glory, the Cardassians pressed on to the planet of El-Ardrel, while the Klingons on orbit did what they could to frustrate the Cardassians. By 02:32 on the 4th, the Cardassians secured orbital superiority above the Klingon garrison. They then mustered their artillery divisions at 03:03 and opened fire on the garrison. While they were protected by a localized shield, it would not hold up under sustained bombardment, and the Cardassians continued to beat it like a drum until at 03:10 the shield collapsed. Half of the continent shattered in the resultant inferno. At last, the Cardassians had avenged the humiliation of 2 years past and put an end to the story of Kachang the Unyielding. Yet it had cost them dearly, losing 41 ships in the battle, and they still had 3 fleets to go. Realizing that those fleets were both mentally and physically depleted from the massacre at El-Ardrel, Sabrag turned his attention to another side of the pocket, the Imperial Guard, trapped in the Iadara system. If he could crush this fleet, then the 2 remaining fleets would surely yield, and so on January 5th, 2375, the Cardassian 15th, 24th, and 19th Orders moved to converge on the Imperial Guard. But commanding the Imperial Guard was Marshal Kurak himself. Being as he was a man of his generation, he had no interest in fighting defensively, and so, upon detecting the Cardassians' approach, enacted his plan to counterattack. With the Cardassian fleets still divided, he elected to engage and defeat them in detail. And at approximately 08:51, the vanguards of all 3 Cardassian fleets were engaged at warp simultaneously. However, the vanguard of the 15th Order soon realized this was no mere delaying action, as the Negh'var decloaked dead ahead. Many of the smaller Cardassian ships immediately scattered at the sight of this fearsome battleship. Those that remained faced a ferocious torpedo volley from the Klingons, with 4 ships being knocked out of warp. Having lost their momentum and facing the pride of the Klingon fleet herself, the 15th Order turned back towards Nami. Having turned back one Cardassian fleet, Kurak with his 2 brigades now moved to reinforce the 3rd Brigade, which had been holding up the 24th Order. Once again, the mere sight of the Negh'var approaching their flank made all but the steadiest crews turn tail, and those that remained faced another Klingon torpedo volley, and so the 24th Order fell back. Hearing what had happened to their comrades and realizing that Kurak was on his way, the 19th Order also withdrew. Kurak and his Imperial Guard lived to fight another day, and that day would come soon enough, as on the 9th of January, the Chancellor's Raiders and the 4th Strike Fleet, along with the Federation 19th Fleet, attacked the Cardassian 14th Order at New Gaul. Outnumbered by more than 3 to 1, the Legate knew he would face a heavy onslaught, but he stood his ground, deploying his fleet between the shipyards and the gas giant, thus protecting his flanks. When the fleet arrived, it split into 2 distinct elements, with the heavy cruiser battle groups forming a line opposite the Cardassians along with the 4th Strike Fleet, while the Raiders, supported by a Federation light battle group, moved to the right flank, attacking the Cardassians through the shipyards. Fierce dogfights broke out in the shipyards as the Cardassian Light Division attempted to hold back a force 3 times its size. Meanwhile, a brutal slugging match was taking place between the 2 main lines, but eventually the Light Division was driven out of the shipyards and their right flank came under attack. All the while, the main line closed in, ensnaring the Cardassians in a trap of their own making. With no chance of victory, the Legate ordered the entire 14th Order to surrender. With the capture of New Gaul, the Dominion encirclement of the Vaultera pocket was broken, and the Klingons, despite the Cardassians' efforts, endured to fight another day. In total, the Klingons lost 177 ships and over 130,000 warriors in the 4-month battle, as well as one of their most promising and respected generals. Despite these losses, their resolve to fight only increased, and so before long the cycle of slaughter would begin once again, as Marshal Kurak would later lament in his journal.
I grieve for our young warriors. I grieve because they live and die without knowing true and honorable combat. When we were young, we dreamed of war with the Federation. We yearned each day for the order to be given. But we did not yearn for death, or the blood of our enemies for its own sake. We wanted to face our foe and look him in the eye. Defeating your enemy was considered far more honorable and noble than merely killing him. But today there is no honor, no nobility, only slaughter for its own sake. The Founders seem only to seek butchery, to kill for killing's own sake. If every battle is to be fought in this manner, then soon there will be no one left. Who will sing songs of our glorious exploits? Who will be left to remember us?